You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. Hello there, and welcome back to Feed Your Wild. And if you are new, welcome for the first time. My name is Vanessa Rodriguez. I'm the host and functional nutritionist, Akashic Soul record reader, and your intuitive nourishment guide today. I have a special solo podcast episode series for you. And I got this topic of exploring my wild pregnancy journey from listeners and from those following me on Instagram. I then polled to see if on Instagram, if there was interest in having a personal solo podcast episode like this around the topic of my pregnancy journey, just to see if you guys actually are interested in that. And if so, what topics and questions would you want me to explore? And I got an overwhelming yes. When polled and surveyed, a bunch of you said yes, sent in your topics and some really wonderful questions. And so they're all over the map. So here I am deciding to share this very personal journey of mine in the hopes that it might, bring some insight or to support to anybody who might be going through pregnancy, as well as being able to share with those in your family or your community who are going through pregnancy journey who might be interested. Now, the topics really spanned the spectrum from very practical advice, such as nutrition and supplements and resources and body care, to emotional and spiritual aspects. And in fact, the majority of you actually wanted me to touch in on more of the soul spiritual aspects of this journey. So in putting together a lot of my thoughts and really reflecting on my journey, it was clear that I needed to break this down into 2 episodes because there is just so much. There's so much. And so this first episode is going to really focus more on what we could say the practical, the physical side, the physical body piece. Of course, you know that if you have been listening to me for a while or following my work, there is no real separation between the physical and the spiritual and the soul. Like there's no separation there. It's all one. So when I speak into more of the physical body aspects of things, just know that a lot of it is also really informed by my spiritual orientation and my energy body and my soul work. So I'm saving a lot of that discussion for the second episode of this 2-episode series. And I hope that you tune into both of them. I hope that there is also information in both of them that can serve you or are interesting, whether you are a seasoned mom, currently pregnant, or thinking about having children in the future. I also want to put the disclaimer out that this is not medical advice. Please, please, please work with your provider, with your intuition, with your body. Everyone is different. I am simply here sharing my personal experience from my own life, what works for me, what does not work for me, and sharing resources that I have found helpful. This is also my first pregnancy, so I am speaking humbly from a place of being a first-time pregnant woman and a first-time soon-to-be mother. At the time of this recording, I'm about 37 weeks, so almost there. You could say I'm around a little over 8 months pregnant. So we're looking at just around the corner. And I know that even within that short span of time at the end, a lot can change. And obviously, I haven't gone through labor yet or the postpartum period. So I'm not going to be discussing any of that. I am really just focusing in on my journey from pre-conception to now. And I'm not going to lie, this is pretty vulnerable for me. I know that I share a lot about my general health journey. If you've been listening and have worked with me, you know that a lot of this, my work, my soul work, and this podcast was really birthed from the events that occurred in my life where my mom was sick with cancer and eventually passed from cancer, and it really catapulted me into a world of holistic healing and exploring so many aspects of health and really finding my purpose within this work, my true soul work in intuitive nourishment. And so really bridging science and spirituality when it comes to health, also exploring like what does it mean to be our wild selves and to fully nourish and feed our wild on all levels. Because again, there is no separation. So body, mind, spirit, emotions, your energy body, like all of it. We look at all of it. That's what this podcast is really about. How do we nourish ourselves on all of these levels so that we can fully step into our utmost expression of who we really are, right? Our core essence of who we came here to be. So I'm going to share my experiences sort of from that lens. I also am going to drop a ton of resources that I have found helpful or that I'm working with, and maybe they'll, be helpful for me and maybe not. There's a lot up in the air still. And again, I approach this with this journey with love and with intentions, but with non-attachment to outcome. And so I'm just sharing what I have been using and working with and what has been helpful with me. You might want to check out the show notes for this one. I'm going to try to have all resources linked up, and this will be on the website. So if you have a podcast app where you can click on the link for the full show notes, that'll take you to my website, wildlyrooted.com, to this particular website podcast episode page. And in the show notes section, in the resources section, I'll have as much as I'm able to link up as possible to make it easier for you, because, I know some of you are really cool about maybe taking notes, but I know that most of us are listening to podcasts while we're walking or cooking or driving or taking care of our family or working. So just know that you can always go back there to refer if there's something intriguing, if you want to check it out, like any books or websites. I'll have that linked up for you because there's going to be a lot in this particular episode. I wanted to now go into focusing on the body and the physical aspects of my journey. And I thought that this was appropriate to start here because considering our upcoming full moon in Taurus, also lunar eclipse this Friday. So Taurus as one of our earth signs and really coming into the body and senses and sensuality. So I thought this was a perfect week to focus on the physical body. Now, just as a disclaimer too, I am a functional nutritionist. I'm technically a certified nutrition specialist and licensed dietitian nutritionist. Those are sort of like my formal titles around the nutritionist piece. However, my specialty has never been prenatal. So there is a lot that I had to learn myself. Of course, I understand the body and have learned a lot about the various stages of life in school and training and have worked with people. But like the majority of my clientele was not prenatal, and I myself did not focus on that. And there's so much around it. So I'm going to share what, as a nutritionist, what was really helpful for me to learn as well, and some resources that I found really, really helpful. Now, when we're talking about nutrition, I'm going to start there because this is Feed Your Wild also, right? And we're looking at nourishment. It starts way before pregnancy, way before conception. So I know that, a lot of times when we get into a life event, it can usher us into finally getting healthy in a certain area. For example, I see all the time people, I'm getting married and I want to look great and feel great. Or people who get pregnant and then they're like, oh, I got to clean up my diet. And it's like, this really starts before that. There's so much that we can tend to at a foundational level to set ourselves up for a healthy any stage of life, but especially pregnancy. And so I will share that for myself, my journey with nutrition and healthy eating and holistic health really began when my mom got sick. And so this was like over 15 years ago. So years of healthy eating, whole foods nutrition, years of detoxing, a lot of detoxing in cycles and healthy ways. And I'm not saying that being in a constant state of detox is healthy. I don't believe that is true. But I do believe that we are in a highly, highly toxic world and environment, increasingly so. And we have to support our body's natural forms of detoxification as well as actively moving into that if you are exhibiting, challenges, which I was for many years. So years of detoxing, tending to the healing of health issues that I had, tending to my liver, knowing my predispositions, having a deep understanding of my own constitution, knowing my tender spots. It's sort of a reframing of weak areas. I don't believe that we have weak areas. I actually believe that our so-called weak areas are actually some of the areas that hold the most power and sensitivity. So I'll call them tender spots. And knowing how to support those areas, and also knowing I am a highly sensitive person in many different ways, energetically, physically, psychically. So I know a lot of you listening are also highly sensitive. This can feel like a gift and a curse. But of course, I feel like there's so much beauty with this, and it's just learning how to move through the world and what works for you when you have this increased sensitivity. I don't drink alcohol because of this. I don't do any drugs. I haven't for a very long time, for years, except for the occasional biodynamic red wine. But honestly, my body has never liked alcohol, like ever, because I think my liver was already dealing with so much since birth. Honestly, since before birth. But I was the firstborn and had like a higher toxic load and all the things that I dealt with as a kid. So like my body already had a load of toxicity and I was highly sensitive. So I was sort of forced to not do a lot of things that, maybe some people take for granted and maybe they don't impact them as much, But for me, they did. And so I have had years of abstinence from a lot of these things. Toxins are a huge culprit in so many fertility challenges and health challenges in general. There is an article that I came across a researcher. Her name is Shauna Swan, and she wrote a book on the topic. But the article was titled, "Most Couples May Have to Use Assisted Reproduction by 2045. I'll link that up. Pretty scary. She talks about all the various ways that our toxic society and increased exposure to toxins is impacting fertility deleteriously. And one of the ways that she's looking at that is a sperm count for men, but there are other ways that they're now looking at this too. As I'd mentioned, I don't live this way and eat this way just during pregnancy or just to have like certain outcomes of health for myself or baby. I do it because it's my lifestyle. I did it before pregnancy. It's literally how I choose to live every single day of my life. And it's what feels best for my body and me. So there are no guarantees in life. I'm not saying that you have to do everything perfectly by any means. Like, this is also why I moved away from just strictly nutrition work to soul level work, because there is so much more beyond just like the food piece and the physical piece that has an impact on our health. And there are some people who can literally eat like shit and be exposed to all these toxins and be totally fine, right? For myself, in my case, that is not true. And so anyway, it's how I choose to live, and it's what feels best for my body and me. And you can do all the so-called right things and still have health issues or potentially have a baby with health issues. I don't make these choices so that I have a healthy baby. Although, of course, that's what I want. That's what I desire. I make these choices because it's what's most aligned for me and my life. And I don't attach to any outcomes. And I think that's really, really important. There's so much more, as I mentioned, beyond the physical, and we cannot control outcomes. I want to put a pin in this because there can be a lot of shaming and blaming and guilt, especially of ourselves. Like, we so often can shame and blame and guilt ourselves, feel super guilty, as well as others, and projecting that onto others. Or we can have these questions of like, well, what if when something happens, like, what if I had just eaten better? Or what if I did more movement? Or what if I? And it's torturous, and it's not healthy, and it's not even based in truth. So I'm here to say, do your best and do what is most aligned for you, which is going to be different than what's most aligned for me. And take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Be like the wise cow and chew the hay and spit out the sticks, right? Keep what resonates and leave the rest. No one can tell you what is best for you except for you. But you really have to be honest with yourself and truly listen to your body, connect with your intuition, and trust, which means you have to cultivate a deep sense of knowing and trust with your body in order to know what is actually good for your body. Okay, so I'm getting off my soapbox there, and we'll get into the actual nutrition portion. So one thing that I did mention, my diet actually has not changed that much since before pregnancy. I actually haven't really changed anything except for increase the amount that I'm eating and increase protein. I follow a mostly plant-based diet, but I am not vegan or vegetarian. I'm also gluten and dairy free, and in general, there's no added sugar. I eat whole, real foods, good quality animal protein. So, all the things, grass-fed, wild-caught, pastured-raised. I do not restrict my eating or count calories. If I look at my plate and what I consume, you could describe it as like a moderate fat diet. So I focus on extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, nuts and seeds, and natural animal fats that, come naturally with these really well-sourced animal proteins. I also will bring in extra protein through protein powders. And over the years, I've just used so many different kinds. I'm not like, with all the brands and anything that I'm recommending, like I'm brand agnostic with everything. Like I don't have any holy grails. I like to experiment and change, and my body likes to experiment and change things up. So Something might work for me in one season of my life and then not work for me in another. And so I switch things up, and this is the nature of my body. You might be different. One protein powder that I have been liking lately is by a company called Mikuna, and it's called chocho. It's basically a legume, the chocho bean, and it has all the essential amino acids. So it is vegan friendly, super clean, just one ingredient. I also will use collagen, but I mostly get collagen from food, but I will bring it in powdered form as well. I'm gluten-free because I'm sensitive to it, and if consuming regularly, it causes inflammation and digestive issues, but I'm not hyper allergic to it, and I'm not celiac. I'm dairy-free due to a lactose intolerance and sensitivity to various proteins in dairy. Plus, constitutionally, it always increases mucus and dampness for me. I have an issue with that. So even, I try like the raw, local, goat versus cow, A2, in fermented forms and all different kinds of ways. And it still causes mucus, unfortunately. It's so sad because I used to be addicted to dairy, and I will use that word addiction when I was younger. And it just caused so many issues. So that's not to say like here and there, once in a while, I might, sneak in a raw goat cheese or try out like a raw kefir and kefir from local sources. And goat milk is a little better for me than cow. But in general, I stay away from it because my body just doesn't like it. And it could be a microbiome thing as well. I definitely see for some clients that they're able, once we clean up and balance out their microbiome, then it could work for them. And I think that's the only way that I'm actually able to tolerate some of these little bits and having like ghee and butter and things like that. But I generally stay away. My sister, who's usually very lactose intolerant, was actually able to eat whole fat cottage cheese during her late pregnancy. And I was so excited that might be me. And unfortunately, I found I'm still sensitive. I don't like getting gassy or mucusy, so I just stay away. And I hardly ever eat out. We do probably 90 to 95% of our food consumption is homemade. And this is where I know that there's like a lot of folks out there that are like, well, I can't make that happen. That's too much time. Like literally logistically, it's not possible for me. And I would say in rare cases that might be true. And I would say in most cases, it's about prioritization and timing and scheduling and the tools that you use as well. And also bringing in support in any way that you can. So a lot of reframing and reprogramming around this, because I think so much of the dis-ease can be avoided if we cook at home. One of my favorite tools with this is the Instant Pot. Surprise, surprise, I'm sure many of you have Instant Pot. It's a game changer. It's just like so freaking easy to use, and set it and you leave it, and then you have like this beautiful meal. So for the busy folks out there, definitely recommend Instant Pot and batch cooking and like freezing and all that kind of stuff. Now, cravings in the first trimester, I had nausea and some reflux, which I actually have a history of chronic acid reflux as well as constipation. So it's interesting to see some of these old ailments that I had flare up, in particular in the first trimester. And these are, supposedly normal for first trimester, although I don't like to position it as such because I feel like then we're creating sort of this template of expectation about what first trimester should look like in other trimesters. And I'm not about that, but I did want to share, I myself did experience nausea, fatigue, and reflux. My body just wanted citrus and tangy foods. Like, that's all I wanted to eat, especially tangerines. By the way, it totally makes sense. Tangerines and tangerine oil, they're amazing. It's amazing for nausea. So even just putting a little bit of the oil on your wrist or smelling it. Grapefruit, also really helpful here. Ginger was my best friend. So fresh ginger juice and shots and tea, also chamomile. So all the really soothing things. And honestly, just taking it easy. I didn't have much of an appetite. And on the worst days, all I wanted was toast. And, I had gluten-free toast as well as locally made heirloom organic sourdough bread, which is actually really delicious. But I never craved that stuff ever. And so it was interesting that this came up at that time. And I recognize that, this is also, okay, partly because of the nausea and super easy to digest and for your body. But it was also conditioning. When I was very little and I would get sick with nausea, I would have crackers and toast, and that's what I would have. And I found that this is what I craved this time around. I also couldn't stand the smell of animal foods being cooked. My sense of smell was incredibly sensitive, and I just wanted fresh, raw foods. It was also springtime, and constitutionally, my body tends to like detoxing and lightening up in the springtime in transition coming away from the winter. And once second trimester hit, which was mostly in the summertime, I was fine. I didn't have any nausea, but I was definitely craving fruits more than anything, which is natural anyway, I think, with hot summers. And it was all kinds of fruits, especially the citrus, grapefruits, and berries, and also culinary herbs and greens. And one thing that I will make note of later, I think so much of my desire for the citrus was not just because of the nausea or just fruits in general. I love citrus, but it's not like I ever have cravings for them. And I think my body was really telling me I had to boost my vitamin C levels in this time, especially because I've had issues with that. I have some also genetic polymorphisms around my ability to absorb and utilize vitamin C. So I think there's probably something going on with that there. As I mentioned, I also experienced constipation for a little bit due to many things, right? Hormonal shifts. There's so many hormonal shifts and so many hormones that are running through your body in pregnancy, as well as increased relaxin, which is this hormone that does just what it says. It relaxes the tissues and the ligaments and the sphincters, so that it allows for growth and expansion. And so the constipation, as I had mentioned, was another predisposition of mine. And, I had experienced years of, but I didn't have that anymore for so many years. So it showed up for a little bit, but I knew what to do to support it since before pregnancy. So I brought those tools in. So for constipation, I focused on high fiber foods. For me, I really need to have high fiber in my diet, and obviously to support my microbiome, but also to literally move the foods through my body. And for some folks, if you have some dysbiosis, high fiber might not be good for you right now. That's a totally different discussion, but that's what works for me. Hydration, good sleep, movements, twists, squatting, also lubrication with oils and fats, and probiotics. And if I really, really had to, I would do an enema. And I'm a big fan of enemas when you need to, especially coffee enemas when you're detoxing. They could be so amazing. I just did regular water enemas a couple times when I really needed to, and then I was fine. I have not had interesting or extraordinary cravings that you might hear about. And the only out of ordinary food that I had a strange draw for was croissant. And I had a dream about being in Paris. Now, for background, I had studied there when I was in college in Paris, and in my dream and in real life in Paris years ago. But I had the most perfect croissant, and it was so real and so good. And when I awoke, and of course that's so full of butter and dairy and gluten, right? When I awoke, I declared, I must find a croissant. I have to. So I did try a couple different ones from bakeries and cafes, and they just did not live up to literally the croissant of my dreams. This was definitely a connection to this timeline, this point in time when I was in Paris. For whatever reason, this came up. There was something about connecting to that energy through the food. So this was not like a physical craving thing. And then it went away, like shortly after I tried and conceded because I couldn't find the perfect croissant. Things that I found interesting was that foods that I usually loved and craved, I took a hiatus from and I did not want anymore. So avocado is one of my favorite foods. Typically, had no desire for avocado. Did not want chocolate. I did not want dates until my third trimester, and then chocolate and dates came in. But I still am not craving avocado, which is so fascinating. Caffeine, not that I had that much before, but my body did not want it in any form, like even green or white teas. So just paying attention to like what your body really wants and is telling you. While in the summer, I had a good amount of fruit and salads with my increasing protein. So I'll talk about the macros and some more of like the vitamins and stuff in a moment. But in my diet, what that looked like was lots of fish. And I know that there could be some controversy around that, but I focus on low mercury, wild caught fish, fatty, cold water fatty fish. And by the end of the summer, I shifted to more warming foods as we started to get into fall time. So soups, broths, saucy dishes, slow cooked meats and beans, spices, lots of ginger in there. And there was a point when I believe my blood volume was expanding so rapidly and therefore relative drop in iron levels. And that's the point where my body craved liver in the form specifically of liver pate. So liver is basically a superfood containing tons of nutrients, including iron, vitamins A, D, etc. It tasted divine when I had it, when my body asked for it. It was total confirmation. And I did both chicken liver and beef liver. We did not use dairy to make it. We used coconut oil instead. And then after a certain point of eating it, I stopped craving it. And I could only eat so much of it. So that was my body telling me enough. We don't need it anymore. Same with eggs and the egg yolks. While I did not want eggs in the first trimester, by the second and third, my body slowly began craving them again, especially the yolk. And it just tastes so amazing to me. So, of course, local pasture-raised chickens, you know, the kind when you crack them and they just are so perky and so orangey and delicious. And we steam them. We basically water cook them. So steam them or boil them until the whites are just cooked, but the yolks are still runny. And there's, in particular with the yolks, the choline, which is super high and so helpful in pregnancy. You'll find that in egg yolks. And vitamin A. So both choline and vitamin A in liver and eggs. Now, this is not to say you can't find choline and vitamin A in plant foods, but these are the foods that my body craved. I also drink infusions, and they include alfalfa and nettle infusions. This I was taking for also extra liver support because those foods increase your iron levels and are super nutritive, like have so many vitamins and minerals in it. And also a mix of greens supplement that contained alfalfa that was recommended by my acupuncturist. So all of these help to support general good iron levels. I also did chlorophyll sporadically throughout until my body just didn't want it, so I stopped taking it. And of course, we can't talk about iron and iron absorption without talking about vitamin C. And so, as I had mentioned, my body was asking for a ton of vitamin C, all the citrus, all the red and orange plant-based foods, which enhances absorption of non-heme iron. So really when your body, I feel like, is in tune or you're in tune with your body, your body will talk to you and tell you what it is that you want. And sometimes it's going to be a croissant and it's not for any deficiency reason, right? And sometimes it's liver pate and sometimes it's a grapefruit. And so just really being open to what that is for you. And I think it's important to note that with regards to iron levels, you do not want high iron levels, like in pregnancy or outside of pregnancy. And I'm wary of iron supplementation during pregnancy unless you really are anemic or you need to boost your iron levels. The body has an intelligence that we do not want to mess with too much. Our iron levels naturally go a bit lower. And this is also in pregnancy. This is also because our immune system shifts during pregnancy. It becomes more selective and alters in order to allow for baby's growth, which means that it suppresses some aspects and potentially allows for infection or colonization of pathogens. Now, many bacterial and parasitic pathogens feed off of iron in our bodies. So by mediating iron levels during this time, our body is actually providing a natural form of protection. It's a natural protective mechanism against these pathogens. And when you override it by overdoing it with iron supplementation, it can actually be harmful. And high iron in general is inflammatory, like at any stage of your life. So it's more of a Goldilocks. You really want to make sure that you have just enough. And of course, working with your provider, monitoring your symptoms. You can do an iron panel. Definitely check out not just serum iron levels, but also ferritin is going to be really important to look at, which is your storage iron, essentially. And monitor your symptoms. So if you show signs of too low iron, so this could look like fatigue, paleness, weakness, looking at your nail beds, your nails, if they're white and don't have any color, then you can begin to either boost iron in your diet, bring in some iron supplementation, work with your provider to increase those levels to a healthier amount for you. And I would go by symptoms as well. In terms of macronutrients, okay, so they're all important, and a balanced diet is key. So protein needs vary depending on stage of pregnancy, but they do go up in general. For the first half, I've read recommendations of going up to 80 grams of protein per day and 100 grams of protein per day for the second half, and potentially more if you're a larger bodied person or you're really physically active. Now, we have to take these generalized recommendations and really see, do they apply to me? Now, I myself am a really petite person, so this was way too much for me. And I found I had a very challenging time trying to increase my amounts of protein because my belly, my appetite literally could not take it. And I'm not going to force feed myself or go down this stress about these things. I go with what my body tells me. And rather than sacrifice the high fiber foods like the fruits and stuff that I was craving, I went with what my body wanted, and I made sure to have adequate protein to satiation. I see so many folks stressing or getting anxious about macronutrients and calories and meeting quotas. And it's my perspective that if you eat healthy and you follow your body's cues, you're fine. And if you're curious about protein amounts, more recent data shows that 1.2 grams per kilogram in early pregnancy and 1.5 kilograms in late pregnancy are good goals to shoot for. Now, I want to highlight an incredible resource I really love. I don't agree with absolutely everything in the book, but I think she does a phenomenal job of having this discussion around everything I'm talking about. And she goes deep into so many areas that I think a lot of people have questions about. Her name is Lily Nichols. She's the author of Real Food for Pregnancy. And this was hands down one of the most comprehensive books on prenatal nutrition I have come across. So check that out if you are interested in that. So she has a whole discussion on protein. She is not in the vegan or vegetarian camp, although she respects if that's your decision and choice and wanting to make it work in that way. She has a whole section talking about considerations and how to do that. She is a proponent of high protein. And this is where, again, like take what resonates with you in these books, but then like really follow what your body is telling you, right? Okay, so I say prioritize mindful eating and pay attention to what your body wants or what your body doesn't want. And this is different than indulging in cravings that are led from malnutrition or poor eating habits or emotional eating. That is very different. And it's very real and it comes up, I know, especially in pregnancy. And it's important not to use pregnancy as some sort of excuse to go off what you know to be healthy for you and supportive for your body and just like dive into all these other things because I'm pregnant and I can eat whatever I want. Like, I think that we can use a lot of things as excuses, and I see a lot of people doing this. And you know, like I'm not making any judgments or anything, but my whole point and view is that you must honor and be supportive of what your body needs, and distinguishing that from cravings that are really coming from a place of poor habits, poor like emotional eating, and that malnutrition. So getting really, really honest with yourself about that. Okay, so let's move into herbs. I did have quite a few questions on herbs. I'm not going to go into a comprehensive look at herbs for pregnancy, which frankly, I don't feel I'm fully qualified for, since I'm not an herbalist that focuses on prenatal care and pregnancy care. There are phenomenal herbalists out there that do just that, and I would seek them out if you're really interested in diving into herbs, because there is a lot of misconceptions and controversy around the use of herbs in pregnancy, and everybody has their different perspective and outlook. You could also see, like, culturally, so many differences when you're looking at it more from a science-based approach. I mean, science doesn't really show that much about herbs. They're not studying herbs that much. So, you know, they're gonna say that a lot of these herbs are not appropriate. And absolutely, there are some herbs that you want to be careful of and are not appropriate for different stages of your pregnancy. And this is where working with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about and doing is really helpful. Some of my favorite resources and books on herbs I just wanted to mention if you want to go down this route. The first is Wise Woman Herbal Collection, The Childbearing Years by Susan Weed. She's an OG, and this is an amazing old school book that I love and very practical. I would also check out Aviva Ram, and her website and her books are always good sources of information. She's a doctor, midwife, and herbalist, and always has really, I would say, balanced views on looking at like the science and traditional uses of herbs and her own experience as a midwife and herbalist. I also have, because I've been really looking at my Puerto Rican lineage and what has been used, and I'll get more into this topic in a moment about how the challenges with that. But one of my sources is Maria Benedetti, and her book in particular, Earth and Spirit, Medicinal Plants and Healing Lore in Puerto Rico, is one of the books that I have just kind of communed with and built a relationship with some of the plants and herbs in that book when she's talking about childbearing years and pregnancy and labor. So I encourage you to look at the traditions of your lineage. If you are aware of, your lineage or traditions, do some digging, research, or a lineage that you feel called to explore that really speaks to you. Also speaking with elders, if you're lucky enough to have elders and people who are experienced in working with herbs and older traditions. I really wish that I had done this with my own abuelas, my grandmothers, when I was younger, but unfortunately, they don't have the mental capacity right now to share any of these things. So I really recommend connecting with elders in your community or in your family. I also am a huge fan of homeopathy, and a wonderful book that is kind of like a family guide that you can use is called Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicines, and that's by Stephen Cummings and Dana Ullman. And this could be really helpful for some challenges like nausea and constipation, for example, that you might be experiencing. So especially since homeopathy is really, really safe, a safe form of medicine, because it's more on an energetic level for pregnancy. And so you don't have to worry as much about potential contraindications or side effects. Now, what herbs did I and am I using in pregnancy? Well, I have daily infusions. And so infusions basically being making a big batch of tea that steeps for overnight. I make these in the evening. I throw about 1 ounce of each herb into a large mason jar and then add just boiled water, so hot water, and let that steep overnight. And then I have the contents of it, really the whole thing, the next day, if I can down that much liquid. So I focus on nutritive herbs and with a focus on red raspberry leaf, which is one of the most, I would say, well-used, researched, and popular herbs for pregnancy, particularly second and third trimester. So kind of like second half of pregnancy. And I will add nettle, oat straw, milky oats, red clover, which actually I found red clover to be very helpful with nausea for me. Alfalfa, I mentioned, helping with liver support and iron along with nettle. Rose hips, which is super high in vitamin C. I'll add jujubes, so red dates that are also incredibly high in vitamin C. Spearmint for flavoring, and then switch things up and rotate the infusions. And sometimes I add ginger or a little bit of fennel seed. And if I don't want to have it straight, then I'll mix it with some coconut powder or coconut milk and a dash of local honey. It's for more of like a latte feel, and it's delicious. So there are also supportive herbs for various points in pre and postnatal journey and for specific indications, such as supporting with labor, boosting your milk supply, healing wounds like your perineum or any tearing. I'm not going to go into that because it's literally like an entirely different podcast episode. And again, it's not my specialty. I do encourage you to follow and or work with an herbalist who specializes in women's health, pre and postnatal care to get more customized information for you about herbs that can be supportive. I did mention that I had been also working with chamomile and ginger for the nausea, and chamomile is really beautiful for just sort of calming my nervous system, as well as the milky oats and the oat straw. Those are pretty much the main ones that I use, I would say, like on a daily basis. So a lot of focus on the nutritive herbs. Okay. Oh, and in terms of sourcing of herbs, the main places where I source them are locally, so from local purveyors, local herb shops, and also local herb farms. One of them is Oshala Farm, and I'll make sure to link these up too, as well as Oregon's Wild Harvest. That's another really beautiful company. They have phenomenal herbs, quality herbs. And if I can't find it in those two places or locally, like from a local herbalist, because I'm very lucky in that I live in a place where there are many herbalists, then I will order from Mountain Rose Herbs too. And pretty much all of those are located in Oregon where I'm at. You may have some beautiful herb farms and sources wherever you are in the world. So look into that for you. Okay, so let's get into some more of the top issues or things that nutritionally and body-wise we might look at or hear about during pregnancy as like being important. Blood sugar being one of them. I had already known my blood sugar was fine after doing my own testing. So again, I think I have, well, you could say advantage sometimes, because sometimes it's not so much of an advantage knowing this stuff, but I am able to do my own lab work. So I had already done my own testing as well as with my health providers. So I knew my blood sugar was fine before and going into pregnancy. I did my own testing with fasting glucose, looking at insulin, as well as hemoglobin A1C. So hemoglobin A1C is essentially a test that you could look at that looks at the span of the past 3 months of your blood sugar levels. This is the test that they use to test for prediabetes and diabetes, and all of that was normal and fine. However, caveat, most people walking around today have blood sugar issues. Many are even pre-diabetic and they don't even know it. And there's even studies where they've checked people and they didn't know it and they're pre-diabetic. And I had major blood sugar issues for years, and it took a long time to really balance this out and repair it. But it's paramount if you want to address any kind of major health challenge or disease. Blood sugar is like that first flick of the domino of health effects. It's so important that you get that on point. It's related to everything, your immune system, inflammation, your hormonal cascade. So you want to make sure your blood sugar and insulin is on point. Now, Lily Nichols, the author of the book that I'd mentioned, Food for Pregnancy, offers a fantastic discussion on blood sugar and the glucose tolerance test that is often used for screening for gestational diabetes in pregnancy. So the main takeaway is that a considerable portion of so-called gestational diabetes is actually undiagnosed prediabetes prior to pregnancy. So meaning many women come into pregnancy with pre-existing insulin resistance. And research has shown that an elevated first trimester hemoglobin A1C, that test I talked about, accurately predicts gestational diabetes in 98.4% of cases. Okay? I think that's really significant. And so again, this whole preconception understanding of what's going on with your body is so important as you go into pregnancy. I personally opted out of doing the glucose tolerance test where you have to consume, that drink of glucose, which is really gross, and get a blood draw. And instead, what I did, because I knew that my blood sugar and insulin levels were good and normal, and I had a normal A1C, instead I did a random blood draw on top of my hemoglobin A1C with sporadic home blood sugar monitoring. I did this again because I know I do not have blood sugar issues and insulin issues, and I'm pretty healthy on that front. This is not a recommendation for you to do the same. And again, if you need to make the appropriate decision for you with your provider, that means you need to make the appropriate decision for you with your provider if you are embarking on these types of tests. I know some women who forego all kinds of testing, and that's their decision. And women have been giving birth for many more years prior to us even having any of these lab tests, right? And doing just fine. I myself like to get geeky. I like looking at labs and numbers, it's the nature of my work. But I don't go overboard with them. I don't get dogmatic. And I'm not super strict about it, right? It's just more of a curiosity, and I like looking at the numbers, but I don't obsess over it. Salt. Let's move into salt. So good salt is so important, and salt is so key for pregnancy. And this is something that's interesting because, there's a lot of history around the government and people saying we need to reduce salt amounts because of heart issues and an increased blood pressure, etc. I eat a shit ton of electrolytes and salt. I have, for background, an Aquarius moon, which usually indicates more salt is needed. I have low blood sugar in general. I also have low blood pressure, and that's very normal for me. I have it lower than most people. And salts are very good for me. They are, for most folks, if you get the good kind of salts. And I need them to support my adrenals, my nervous system, my electric body. A lot of people need that. They don't realize if they switch up forms of salt and bring in the correct amounts of salt for themselves, it could be very supportive. So I'll talk about some ways that I do that. And with hydration, so hydration is also super, super key for pregnancy because you're literally like creating amniotic fluid and all this water, and like there's just so much water that is needed. And we can touch on more of like the energetics of water and the emotional aspects of water and the soul levels. Like there's so much with good water. So drinking a lot more fluids in general is really important. And in my case, we have well water that has been tested. So we drink that, and spring water as well when we're able to get that, like local spring water. I also will add minerals and electrolytes to our well water when my body tells me that I need to, because well water can change in amounts of minerals as well. And my body will literally crave and tell me like it needs more of these particular minerals. The minerals that I'm using currently that I add in are Omni Blue Ocean minerals. I really love those. And then I vortex it. So if you haven't heard about vortexing and structuring your water or structured water, please check out my interview with Isabel Friend on water. It's called Water is Life, as well as her e-courses, which are chock full of resources and info on the importance of structured water. And so the way that I vortex it very easily and on the go is basically using a little latte hand mixer to get it spinning and vortexing it. And that helps to structure, and I add the minerals with that as well. And staying well hydrated prevents a bunch of the stuff that we're told is common with pregnancy, like constipation, hemorrhoids, muscle cramps, headaches, bladder infections, like swelling. All this stuff can honestly be prevented by good nutrition and good hydration. I don't have any of these. I haven't experienced any of these except for a little bit of the constipation and nausea in the beginning. But I think it really speaks to just like being on top of a lot of these basic foundational things. I also have a green juice nearly every morning and some green smoothies in the summertime. I no longer do that now that it's fall time and going into winter. But the green juices will have a super high electrolyte foods like celery and a cucumber as a base, and then adding in herbs like parsley or cilantro and lemon and ginger, and like sprucing it up in different ways. I put in a lot more ginger to make it kind of hotter and spicier during the fall time when it's a little bit cooler. And, some days it's too cold and I don't want a green juice, and I alternate that with teas, my infusions, or a veggie broth or a bone broth. And those are also beautiful ways to bring in deep hydration and nourishment with minerals and electrolytes. I want to get into supplements because I had multiple questions about supplements. And again, with my supplement regimen, I just want to note that, first of all, I focus on food first. And I believe that should be the case for everybody. And supplements should be used as what they're called, as supplemental to your diet. And during this time, I focused on supplements that are not only good for pregnancy, but also my immune system, especially during these times. Okay, so let's first start off with digestive-focused supplements. Digestive enzymes, super helpful for me in the first trimester. And then I just kept them in because I find that they've been really helpful for me. I don't have them every single day. And I use a plant-based one. There are so many different brands out there, and I like a lot of them. But currently the one that I'm using is Rainbow Light Advanced Enzymes System. I have tried a lot of different enzymes. Smidge is another really great brand. I mean, there's just so many out there. I'm not going to name them all. But what I have found with my body currently, it really likes this plant-based formula of the Rainbow Light Advanced Enzyme System. So I'm using that. I also had a papaya fruit-based enzyme that was really helpful when I was having more reflux and just sort of nausea, and those were chewable. So that was a really good one as well. Probiotics. Oh man, the microbiome is so important. And if you follow my work, you know that that's like one of my jams and what I teach. And I have an entire program all on the gut and really looking at these interconnections. I cover all this in my program, Feed Your Wild Gut. Also looking at, the importance of the microbiome in pregnancy and for baby in utero. The probiotic that I have been using lately and I really love is Seed. I'll mention some other ones as well. I also do fermented foods, mostly sauerkraut and coconut yogurt, some coconut kefir, coconut water, also natto, which is a Japanese fermented food, super high in vitamin K, also really important. Prebiotics. So we talk about probiotics and probiotic foods, but prebiotic foods are incredibly important and maybe even more important than the fermented foods, honestly. High fiber foods, most of them are going to be prebiotic. You want to go for the gooey and gelatinous foods and herbs, also foods that are high in polyphenols. So lots of color, very colorful, saturated foods are going to be prebiotic, which means like the food for your biotics, the food for your microbiome, and the live probiotics that are in you. I eat a lot of resistant starches. So this is a kind of prebiotic food that's rich in fiber and feeds my microflora. And that includes unripened plantains. So my partner has a specialty that he makes the best plantain pancakes. And plátanos, plantains, are a staple food in my culture. I grew up eating them. You could say I'm made of plátanos. This baby that I'm having is probably going to be made of plátanos. So unripened plantains and also ripened plantains too. I eat those, but it's the unripened ones and unripened bananas in general that have a lot of this resistant starch. And yes, you can make pancakes from it. It's awesome. Also, legumes and cashews. I like a fermented cashew spread that serves kind of as my cream cheese substitute. It's from Miyoko. It's delicious. I really love it. And also making your own if you're able to do that. And cooled potatoes. So like potato salad increases resistant starch in the potato. When we look at the microbiome and in connection to pregnancy, the organisms found to be the most protective for mom and baby are a wide variety of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species, and for the prevention of group B strep and UTI, so that also known as GBS, group B strep. So we'll talk about that in a moment. In terms of more specific strains, you want to make sure you're getting Lactobacillus reuteri and Lactobacillus rhamnosus. And you can even find these on their own. The dose is usually at least 15 billion, but up to 50 CFUs daily in any product. Aside from the overall importance of your microbiome and the development of baby and baby's microbiome, these will also help prevent deleterious colonization of species like GBS or group B streptococcus, as well as bacterial vaginosis. Now, GBS is something that is actually normal, in small amounts, but it is something that they test for in a lot of times in late stage pregnancy. And that's because if there is the possibility of baby getting inoculated and gets infection with GBS, that it can cause some major health issues. Now, this is actually very rare, and there is a lot that you can do to mitigate any kind of overabundance of GBS or like an imbalanced microflora in general. So you want to be supporting your microflora, in your gut and vaginally in general, like for health, for you and for baby. And there's so much that you could do before doing antibiotics and like systemic antibiotics. Although, of course, again, I'm not advocating for any one particular way. Everybody's situation and body is different. So you really have to inform yourself, do your research. The probiotics that I use are Seed. I use that daily. Smidge, I really love Smidge's probiotics. I've been using them for years prior to their brand change. And they also have a really beautiful one for infants, for babies. And then I'll also use one intravaginally. And these change up, but the one that I was currently using is Vitanica's Femme Ecology, which also has Lactobacillus acidophilus, Plantarum, ruderi, rhamnosus, and salivarius. There's also Crispatus, which is a strain of bacteria that you actually want in your vaginal microbiome, but there isn't necessarily a probiotic to bring that in. It's really about balancing out the ecology in your vaginal region and in your gut. So it's important to look at the whole picture and not just like focus solely on these and specific strains. I talk about the importance of maternal microbiome for baby, particularly in establishing a healthy immune system and a template of health in my Soul Gut Immunity Masterclass. And so I have decided to make this available for a limited time for free. When you sign up using the link, I'll make sure to have the link below. This is a free masterclass called Soul Gut Immunity. And I also go into extensive teachings around the microbiome in my course, my bigger, larger program, Feed Your Wild Gut. And I talk a little bit about the program at the end of the masterclass. So if you want to find out more, you can go there and watch out. So you can use that link to sign up for the Soul Gut Immunity Masterclass if you want to learn more about this really, really important stuff. Okay, so prenatal supplements. You know, I'm not one to say that prenatals is for everybody. I know that could sound like blasphemy for some people, and especially as a nutritionist. I myself am taking a prenatal. I don't do it every day because, again, I'm following what my body is telling me. But you want to take a prenatal with really good quality bioavailable minerals and vitamins. Methylated B vitamins work really well for me. They don't work for everybody, but they do for me. So I get them with methylated folate and B12, as well as making sure it has choline and getting one without iron, because my iron should be all before. I would rather increase that with foods and herbs if I need to, or take a separate supplement if I have to. And doing a bioavailable form of iron, like ferrous bisglycinate, versus there's some other forms of iron. I also am a fan of liver pills, so literally like taking liver and cutting it up into tiny pieces and freezing it, and then like taking it with water or throwing it in your smoothies. That's a wonderful way to take liver if you can't stand liver or you just don't want to eat it. Or a desiccated liver supplement, or spirulina. I was doing a lot of spirulina in the summer in some smoothies and just sprinkling it on things. So that's a vegan source to spruce up your iron levels. With the prenatal, I do not take the full recommended amount because it would be way too much for me, considering my size and the quality of my diet. I don't need it. There was a period when taking them increased my nausea, and I believe it was because it was just too much for my liver. My liver was working overtime, processing all of the increased hormones and whatever else was going through. And so I followed my body cues, my intuition, and I modulated the amounts that I took of my prenatal based off of that. And I always focus on food first. And so again, I would talk to a healthcare provider who actually knows about like good nutrition and recommendations for prenatals. The one that I have been taking, and this is not the only one, but this is the one I'm currently taking, is Seeking Health Optimal Prenatal. They have capsules that you swallow, and they also have chewables. They're both really great. So that's the brand that I'm currently using. Vitamin D. Vitamin D. Oh, man, vitamin D3 is so important. Levels, if you get your levels checked, which I had done prior and I understood what my vitamin D levels were, Levels between 55 and 80 are linked with healthier outcomes for baby. And I knew that I had been low because I tested in the winter, and most people are low pretty much all year round. So I would definitely recommend, if there's going to be a test, to check any levels, check your vitamin D. And yeah, you want to, they'll say that normal is like starting at 30. Really, you want higher. You want like above 55. And so I also got as much sun exposure as I could during the spring and summer. And now that it's rainy and colder here, I'm relying a little bit more on the supplement. And then making sure you're not overdoing it with the vitamin D, right? You don't want to go overboard. But studies show that vitamin D deficiency during pregnancy puts you at a higher risk for preeclampsia, having a low birth weight baby, and gestational diabetes. And studies have also linked vitamin D deficiency with worse outcomes and hospitalization when it comes to COVID infection. So vitamin D is so incredibly important. This is not debatable or questionable. This is in tons of studies and research. And the fact that like it's not touted more, I just don't understand. I don't get it. So check your vitamin D levels, make sure that you're higher, and take care of that. Magnesium. Internal and topical magnesium oil is what I use. So internally, I'll take a smidge, has an AM and PM magnesium. That's really great. I also take Innate Response as another brand, and a variety of forms of magnesium. Magnesium is also pretty high in the Ocean's Minerals drops that I had mentioned before for the electrolytes. So I'm getting a lot of magnesium in addition to everything that I'm bringing with foods. I'll mention some good sources. But I also will put topical magnesium using magnesium oil. Ancient Minerals has a beautiful one. You could also, I don't have a bathtub, and I could do a foot bath, which I do sometimes, but I just find the magnesium oil to be really accessible and easy to do, and like to give myself a little massage in my legs. You could do this as sort of a preemptive thing to cramps. Like you don't have to wait till you have cramps to utilize the magnesium oil. Although if you do have like leg cramps, for example, highly recommend you utilize the magnesium oil, and Ancient Minerals has a good one. But you could also do a bath and do a mix of the Ancient Minerals magnesium and some maybe Epsom salt baths if you can tolerate that. But I like to do Dead Sea salt. I like to add and mix with the Dead Sea salt into baths when I'm able to have a bath. And good sources of magnesium: seaweed. So we cook our soups a lot with seaweed and have dulse flakes on salads and such. Green leafy vegetables, pumpkin seeds, Brazil nuts. A lot of the seeds and nuts are going to have magnesium. So just get a good variety of that. Avocado, bone broth, and a lot of the green herbs, the culinary herbs like chive, cilantro, parsley, mint, dill, sage, basil, all those beautiful things. DHA and omega-3s, omega-3 fatty acids. I do a good amount, as I mentioned, of wild-caught low-mercury fatty fish and seafood, which is super high in DHA. Like, I think a can of sardines already, like, you meet your quota with that. So we also do sardines with the bones and salmon. But I've also been supplementing, and I do a fish-based supplement that's tested for contaminants, toxins, and heavy metals. It's the Pure Encapsulations brand. And so that's a higher form of DHA, but it also contains EPA. You want to make sure that you get one that has both of those. And for vegetarians and vegans, you can get DHA with an algae-based DHA supplement if you want to get your DHA from that. Body care. So I had a question around a lot of different therapies of body care and movement and exercise. So I'll walk you through some of the things that I'm doing. And one thing I will note is that movement and exercise has been probably the one thing that, of anything, I've been on and off, like in adulthood. So it's not like I was sticking with any one thing regularly or working out every day. So this is something that I really began to intentionally increase in the forms that felt appropriate for me in pregnancy. And one of the things that I do that is like a staple and a foundation, and I do it every day, is walking. And I walk at least 2 miles a day. And if I could get it in hiking or in nature, that's what I do. And it literally resets everything, like mood, my breathing, just like bringing like the lymph flow. It just is, aside from being really wonderful for baby position and your hips and your pelvic area. So walking, if you could get in at least 2 miles a day, awesome. And breathing in that fresh air deeply has an immediate effect for me. So I encourage you, if you have access to like a park or a forest or some sort of nature spot, definitely recommend that you make that a priority. Yoga and stretching, that's something that I had done prior and I continued, but of course modified for prenatal. And I just do a bunch of like prenatal yoga videos on YouTube. I don't do any kind of fancy program or anything, although you do want to be careful not to stretch too much or too far, since that hormone relaxin can really increase your flexibility, but potentially lead to injury if you're stretched too far. This actually happened to me. I had an injury that happened with one of my ligaments because of my hips, which I'll talk about. The one thing, if you were to call it a challenge, that I experienced in pregnancy is the widening of my hips, because I didn't really have hips. And thank God, body is making space and room for baby. But I also have a lot that I carry in my hips in terms of like energetics and emotions and ancestral stuff that I'm still working through. So hips is a thing for me. But there was one morning where it was basically, I call myself like in those stages, like a transformer. Like I woke up and I would move and it'd be like pop, 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 lock, 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 pop, 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 like literally my body shifting and making all these popping sounds in my hip area. And one morning I was getting out of bed and my left hip popped really loud and shot this pain down like a ligament and into my vagina. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, what was that about? And honestly, we still don't know. I've seen practitioners, they make assumptions or suggestions as to like what could have happened. But it was really painful for quite a while. So I had to be very, very careful with the stretching and the yoga and the movements that I was doing until it sort of recovered. And now I would feel like it's still sensitive, but it's recovered. And there was a point where I was feeling better and I got a little too confident and did some stretching that was a little too much. Nothing crazy, but just too much for me, and it set me back. So just honoring the limitations of your body, right? And not pushing yourself too hard because you feel like you have to. Squatting. Squatting is probably one of the most important things, I think, for human health. I had been doing a ton of squatting before. I mean, that's how I work at a low coffee table. I do a lot of floor sitting and squatting. For years, I was doing cooking on the floor and squatting. And so it was very easy for me. But, obviously, as you move forward in pregnancy and you grow and things change in your body and you have aches and things like that, it could be more difficult. But if you could get in a ton of squatting every day, that's going to be so helpful in general for health, but supposedly for labor as well. So we shall see. Dance. Dance is always a go-to for me, and like how I express myself and connect with my soul. So dance is also part of my movement and exercise routine. And I also have done a lot of videos from Melissa Wood. I think it's melissawood.com. And she's got some great, really gentle, more Pilates and mat-based focused movements that I really enjoyed. And she's got some prenatal pregnancy videos that I was doing and I still go to. So I like those as well. And lastly, for movement, I'll talk about this more in a moment, but it's spinning babies. If you haven't heard of spinning babies, it's basically a concept and organization created by midwife Gail Tully. And they describe a pregnancy preparation as well as labor activities to ease birth. And they have activities with anatomy and physiology in a way that really allows baby to release rather than to be, quote, delivered by mechanical manipulation or force. So it's really a set of movements and labor activities that are supportive for like during the pregnancy journey and in labor in order to help with baby's positioning and also your health in general. So therapies and practitioners when it came to body care. Now, I want to first say that I know this is not accessible to a lot of folks for a variety of reasons, whether like you just don't have these types of practitioners in your area where you are, or it's like not accessible financially or in your budget. And I just want to name my awareness around that and my privilege in being able to access these types of therapies. I also want to highlight that like I make a very, very modest income. It's not like I have a huge budget to be spending. I spend money on food, shelter, and self-care and health. That's pretty much it. I don't really shop. I don't go out to eat often. I do not drink alcohol. I don't have super large expenses elsewhere, except for maybe some student loans. So this frees up my budget for really good food, for groceries, for rent, and for health and body care. And of course, like I do have insurance. So insurance covers some things, but very, very little, unfortunately. Okay, so I have a midwife who's amazing, and working with her, craniosacral therapy, so helpful for my energy body and processing and releasing of emotions and energy in my body and realignment along with physical alignment that I do with my chiropractor. But I do craniosacral therapy here and there, and that's been really helpful for me to release some energies and attune and support my alignment energetically. Chiropractor, my chiropractor is awesome. She's certified in what's called the Webster technique. It's a specific chiropractic approach that helps facilitate pelvic balance and nervous system function. And so this is with the understanding that greater balance in the pelvic muscles and ligaments and a reduction of torsion to the uterus allows for a greater potential for the baby to assume an optimal birthing position. So that's what it's all about. So she focuses on pre and postnatal chiropractic, and I think you could go to the Webster Technique website. They have a database. You could look up people in your area. That's actually how I found her, although then I eventually found out that we have mutual friends and clients. So I highly recommend a chiropractor during pregnancy if you could do that. I have an acupuncturist who I was seeing prior to conception and pregnancy because of what I mentioned, some of the more of the reproductive and sexual, the reproductive womb related issues that I was having. And then I just continue to see her during my pregnancy, which has been very helpful. I have a naturopathic doctor who I see. Shout out to Dr. Mickey. And I don't see her very often. I was seeing her prior. She has been my naturopathic doctor, just like I was seeing my acupuncturist, but she has continued to provide care for me during pregnancy. I also started to see a pelvic floor physical therapist. And I mentioned I had always had hip issues, and this really increased as they widened. So hip pain and popping, and I caused some vaginal and pelvic floor stress. So working with her has been really enlightening, and I recommend anybody who has like issues in this area in general, like whether it's like you're not pregnant or you are, or after having kids, I recommend finding a really good pelvic floor therapist or someone who is specializes in pelvic care in general. I also am blessed to have a friend, Elizabeth Gomez, one of my good friends in the area, who is a massage therapist and has provided some massages for me, and I'm so grateful. So this is where, like, if you can get friends, family, like community, do exchanges, like energy exchanges for various therapies, I highly recommend. If you cannot afford to get these, because I would not be able to really, that's another way, an alternative way to bring in some of these therapies if you don't have the funds for it. And of course, calibrate the therapies based on your needs, right? Like I was seeing some of these practitioners prior to getting pregnant for other challenges and general wellness needs of mine, and I continued during pregnancy, and then I added some new ones based off of what my needs were. So everybody's going to be different. I have a little bit more to go, so if you're up for hanging out a little bit longer, all right, so let's just all take a breath. Right now, I know that I've just dropped so much information, maybe too much, but honestly, like take what resonates, what you want, what sounds helpful, and leave the rest. Check out the resources I have. I have just a little bit more that I want to share, so if you want to stick with me, I encourage you to do so. I want to get into the topic of personal care, because that was another question that I got was, like, what products are you using for personal care, and just in general, what are you doing? So when it comes to personal care products and household products, again, I've been doing non-toxic, natural, organic products for many years. So there wasn't any huge change here. It wasn't like I needed to change out my cabinet. But I do highly recommend a so-called detox of your pantry, of your cleaning supplies, as well as your personal care cabinet starting now, like at any point in your life. Because again, as I'd mentioned, the toxicity levels of so many of these products, especially like in makeup and feminine care products, are just like crazy high. So I did this clean out many years ago. We didn't really have to make any changes. In terms of resources, my sister turned me onto this woman, I forgot her name, and I'm sorry. I'll try to make sure I have it in the show notes. But her handle on Instagram is Non-Toxic Munchkin, and I think that's also her website, Non-Toxic Munchkin. She's a researcher, mama, who writes extensively on safe products for home and baby. Man, she writes about so much. It's really awesome. I know there are so many more resources out there, but I don't follow a ton, honestly, so I don't have their names. But if you want to put them in the comments section in the Instagram post, or mention them to me, I'd be happy to post them up as well. I keep things super simple. Like I have my go-to cleaning and personal care products already that I'll share. But I don't go crazy, and I don't go like super expensive with things. For my belly oil and body oils, I'll use coconut oil, shea butter, and cocoa butter. I like Earth Mama's belly oil. I've been using that. That's beautiful. It has a mix of some gentle herbs like calendula and neroli, makes it smell really lovely. So I've been using that on my belly. And also Buddha butter, which is basically a mix of the coconut, shea, and the cocoa, and smells awesome. And that's pretty much it. And just like regular old coconut oil too for my body. For face and skincare, acne has always been a thing because of my liver and stress in my life. And skin in general is how my body tells me something is off. But I'm totally brand agnostic, like I had mentioned, meaning I like to switch things up. I don't have any holy grail products. that I stick to for a very long time because my body tells me to switch. I'm also in human design, a 3-5. So my nature is to trial and experiment for those of you who are human design people. I was using a cold cream that I liked by Ancient Owl. I used it for quite a while. And the thing that I like about that is that it's one product. Like, you don't need anything else. It saves money that way, even though it is, I would say, maybe pricier than what a lot of people might be used to if you're just going to the regular drugstore. But it's like one product and that's it. And I really enjoyed it. But when I also, like, when I feel comfortable to splurge, I'll do Living Libation products. I love Nadine Artemis. We have a podcast episode with her too, the founder of Living Libations. But all of those products became too perfumey for me because of their strong essential oils during pregnancy. And my nose was so sensitive. So I switched to plain jojoba, and now I use Marie Veronique brand, which is a essential oil free oil cleanser. So it doesn't have that smell. And so yes, I do oil-based cleansing. And I also like Evan Haley's facial serum, oils, and hydrosol sprays. I use the Rose hydrosol spray, and I use that for now. So I really enjoy those products too. I also love products by Jessica LaCour, Feather Eagle Sky. We had her on the podcast too, and she makes them with so much love and handmade. So I like to purchase from makers like that. Makeup, I don't really wear makeup. But if I do want to spruce it up or have fun, or like maybe I have a gnarly red spot or acne and I just want to cover it up a little bit, I'll use RMS Beauty Uncover Up for spot concealer. I really like RMS Beauty line. For lip, I hardly ever use anything like a lipstick. But if I do, the brand is Ilia for lipstick, and Saie, S-A-I-E, for a tinted moisturizer. Their slip tint is really great. But honestly, like, I've only used that a few times because I don't wear makeup. I don't really need to in general. And I'll use it for special occasions or events, but I kind of just stick with this simple no makeup look. Let's see, soap. I use Dr. Bronner's, and I'll switch up between eucalyptus and unscented, but the unscented is really great, and that could be used also for baby too, very gentle. For hair, so I have wavy, curly, semi-coarse hair that is medium fine. So I have to be careful with things that are too heavy, and changing up things is always a good thing. I was using seaweed, but I found that the Seaweed Company shampoo and conditioner actually made my hair a little too limp. Also, I think it depends on the water that is available wherever you are and what's in your water. So I have to be careful with things that are too heavy, and changing up is a good thing. I currently have brought back in Giovanni shampoo and conditioner, which has been good with my hair, even though they're not the cleanest product. I actually don't wash my hair that often because it doesn't need it. So sometimes I literally will just use water and a little bit of conditioner, and then I'll clarify with rice water or apple cider vinegar. And sometimes with a clarifying shampoo, but those usually have more chemicals in them than I'd like. So I just keep it simple there too. And then lastly, I just want to mention oral care. The oral microbiome is so important and not talked about enough in prenatal care and pregnancy. And this has been a journey for me, just oral care in general, over the years and in pregnancy. In pregnancy, you become more leaky. So like your blood volume expands, relaxin hormones relax your muscles and tissues, and you can experience increased bleeding in general with gums, with your flossing. And so you just want to make sure that you're tending to that area. I like to use earth paste toothpaste, and I also switch that up with Dental Sidin. Dental Sidin is a line by the company Biocidin, so I really like them. And then once in a while, I'll use an ozonated gel from Living Libations for my gums if I feel that they're getting sensitive. In this next part, I wanted to touch in on birthing traditions. I've been really interested in what birthing traditions look like prior to the colonization and medicalization of birth in Puerto Rico, where my family is from. But it's pretty freaking challenging to find lots of info on that, unfortunately. So when I started to look, what I found was that traditional medical systems and birth work have gone ignored and unrecorded globally, including Puerto Rico. And when the island was colonized, the medicine people, the herbal medicines were slowly displaced. And the medicalization of Puerto Rico that occurred in the late 20th century really served to further displace traditional birth workers and healers and their legacies. Prior to the medicalization, Puerto Rico had a long history of folk medicine and midwifery. And healing was really in the hands of primarily female practitioners, and childbirth was controlled by the birthing woman herself. But again, there's really not a ton of information concerning these practices of traditional healers and midwives. And, this is a sad direct result of colonizations and erasure of histories of Black and Indigenous communities, as many healers had Indigenous or slave ancestry in Puerto Rico. And we see this story happen in so many parts of the Americas in general. So I just wanted to name that because as I started to look at more what you could say folk or traditional practices, like trying to find stuff in my own lineage has been pretty challenging. And so I can imagine it's probably similar for a lot of you as well. And I just want to honor that sometimes it's not always accessible. But this was something that I really wanted to dive more into. So again, I had mentioned one of my resources, Maria Benedetti. She's an author and herbalist who's written extensively about traditional healers of Puerto Rico, recording their oral histories, practices, and remedies. I mentioned her book, Earth and Spirit, Medicinal Plants and Healing Lore in Puerto Rico. And she says that Puerto Rico got many methods from the Mayans, actually. Abdominal massages were used to move babies at all times, even during delivery. That there was a great wealth of botanicals used during, before, and after delivery as well. And that some of these practices included vaginal steam and treating the placenta. Now, was the placenta eaten in Puerto Rico? She doesn't know. She doesn't believe that anyone living really knows, or no one would admit it. And a lot of these practices, is it a Mayan or Arawak practice? Because the Tainos come from the Arawaks. So it's interesting. She says that investigating a lot of these issues, she's found it kind of takes you back to the Mayans anyway. And there's a lot of cross-cultural traditions that have occurred prior to the colonization by Europeans in the Caribbean. So it wasn't just the Taino, but there was also a lot of trade and again, this cross-cultural exchange between surrounding areas, including Mexico and South America. So what are now known as Mexico and South America. As I looked at the origin stories of midwifery in Puerto Rico, I found that it's very similar to the origin story of Puerto Rican heritage and culture in general. So it's a combination of the colonizers, so the Spaniards, the indigenous, so Taino, and then any other indigenous people that were in the surrounding area as well from so-called Mexico, and slaves, African slaves. So there can be no one true history of Puerto Rican midwifery because really Puerto Rico is just sort of this composite of a bunch of different traditions and cultures, and it's really intricate and diverse, like the people of Puerto Rico themselves. So it was tough to find some things outside of what I have discovered through Maria Benedetti's books. I'm sure there are many other books out there. However, I just have not come across them. So if you are listening and you have some resources, specifically within the Puerto Rican melting pot, so to speak, traditions and heritage and culture, I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me, shoot me an email, find me on Instagram at Wildly Rooted. I would love to hear more about that and learn more. One of the practices that I had been drawn to, which did not come from my own lineage, was the work with the rebozo. Now, one thing I want to say is this pregnancy has really highlighted the power of intention, prayer, and manifestation. And I believe, with baby's energetic influence to make things happen more quickly. I know a lot of people say this, the babies bring abundance, babies help manifest. And yes, it's true. I have found it definitely is true. And here's one instance. So I had been wanting to learn more about working with rebozo. Rebozo is a hand-woven shawl used in so-called Mesoamerican traditions for many purposes. It's a companion of the woman during her whole life. So during pregnancy, birth, and baby carrying, as well as being used as a shawl and carrying things in general. And traditionally in Mexican midwifery or parteria, it's used to support a woman's body during pregnancy by folding it and wrapping it very tightly under the belly and around the hips. It provides support and stability. It can offer relief to discomfort of the low back and hips, and also securing things like heat packs or carrying items. And during labor, the rebozo can be used in many different ways. It could be wrapped around your back and held by the tails by a support person or like a door, so that the woman can hold on to it and relax, or squat and pull it. It can be hung, as I mentioned, from a high point and provide stability while you're moving and dangling and squatting during labor and birth, also just during movements and exercise in general. And you can gently shimmy the belly or the hips to provide relief for discomfort. So there's so many different ways to utilize this. I mean, I don't even like to call it a tool because there's so much more in its connection to the culture. But even in postpartum, too, in postpartum adjustment, the rebozo can be used to wrap around the belly and the hips for support while the body slowly heals and moves back into its physiological state prior to pregnancy. And of course, the same rebozo can be worn to carry the baby as well. So baby carrying. My partner is Mexican. His family is from Mexico. And although I don't have a direct connection to the use of rebozo in my own Puerto Rican lineage, at least that I'm aware of, it's definitely something that has been used in his ancestral lineage. And I felt increasingly drawn to it. So I had this 1 week where I was really thinking about it. I was super interested in learning more and connecting with this beautiful culture. And the week that I was telling him about it and how I'd love to explore this beautiful tradition with someone who holds the teachings, that very same week, he ran into a friend of a friend whose wife is a doula and one of the founders of the Cihuapactli Collective in Arizona. So the Cihuapactli Collective's mission, what they do is provide healing for urban indigenous peoples from the diaspora. And they do so by sharing wisdom, connecting resources, revitalizing traditional knowledge, promoting and advocating for health and wellness. They have workshops and classes. They're online. They're awesome. And when she heard of my pregnancy, she offered to share the teachings and work with rebozo. Now, she was only here visiting for I think a couple of weeks. So it's pretty amazing that literally, of course, it makes sense energetically and calling in and spiritually in this, the sort of the unseen forces that are at play here and the power of intention. But I just thought it was so kismet and beautiful. So she ended up gifting me a rebozo, and also gifting me like a mini workshop where she taught us part of the lineage and showed us how to use it. And I have been using it to support my body in various ways throughout pregnancy. So I just want to say a special thank you to Liza for your generosity, your teachings, and beautiful gift. And also to our dear friends, Elizabeth and Humberto, who made this connection possible. Thank you so much. We also have purchased a longer rebozo because there's different sizes for baby carrying from a website called indigenamami.com. So I'll have that link for you if you are interested in checking her out and her work. She works with indigenous peoples in Mexico and in really supporting women in bringing back this lineage and culture of utilizing the rebozo. And she's an independent mama who is running this business. So I wanted to support her, and she has beautiful ones. indigenamami.com. So I'll link that up. Of course, I think it's important to speak to the lineage and the popularization and the appropriation that has been happening too, with this in particular, but I mean, with like so many things, right? And I think it's critical that we really honor the cultural history, the significance, and acknowledge the history of oppression when connecting and working with any traditional practice, tool, or whatever it may be. So I just want to speak to that because I see it getting popular. I see it being used by people who may not even know the history or don't really share the cultural history or significance. And so I encourage you to connect with resources, folks that are like in the lineage and the culture and are providing these teachings in a good way. Okay, so that is one part of the body care that I am utilizing. And I had mentioned way earlier about spinning babies, which is another resource for supporting baby positioning and positioning during labor and therapeutic movements during pregnancy. They provide a ton of resources, and they're also a lot of what they teach was in many traditional ways of knowing in midwifery. And we see this a lot, like things that have been so-called lost, but really just mostly oppressed or suppressed. And then they come through, and mostly like through American resources. And yet, like, they're practices and tools that have been used for years and years and years in other cultures. So I'm not saying anything about, that spinning babies is participating in like a larger appropriation or anything. I think their work is phenomenal. They provide a ton of resources. And I've been doing a lot of their recommended movements and poses. And I'm so grateful that it seems like their work is making this understanding of physiology of pregnancy and baby and positioning and all of that, like the therapeutic movements, it's making it more accessible in the mainstream. So I had a family member who is a doctor and works in also the laboring rooms in the hospitals. And she sent me a picture of a poster that they have up of a spinning babies poster. So they're utilizing these tools too in some hospitals, and that's really awesome because there's so much that we can do with our bodies and the wisdom of our bodies. So check Spinning Babies out. They've been really helpful in bringing in some movements for my own body. All right, so with all of that said, I know that I shared a lot, and maybe for some of you it was like overwhelming, or there was just too much, or it's all the things. And I just want to say that again, like, take what stands out, take what you were looking for, leave the rest. Remember to follow your body, what your body needs, and your intuition. I do want to really highlight in my personal experience this process of breaking this lineage of dis-ease. I feel like my entire body of work, and on a personal level and on a professional level, has been breaking this lineage of dis-ease in my family and ancestrally. And most directly, like the difference between what my mom had experienced in life and what I am experiencing in my body and health. And we had very similar body composition and, we looked very much alike. And a lot of what she had experienced would be thought of as genetic, my genetic fate. And that's just not the case. There's so much that we can do to change the story. And so what I have found in this discovery process during pregnancy is that I have not had most of the challenges that my mom said that she had during her pregnancies. She had experienced swelling, like major swelling, fatigue, cramping in her legs and her body, cravings, headaches, excess weight gain, and amongst other things like digestive issues. I haven't had like any of these. And I attribute that to years of clean eating and detoxing, caring for my body, doing deep, deep energetic and ancestral work, and honestly, just good nutrition during pregnancy and like being supported and connected to nature. I really feel that I have sort of broken this lineage of dis-ease when it came to pregnancy and the birthing process. So we shall see when it comes to labor, but I know that so much in these journeys during pregnancy and labor have so much to do with our connections to our lineage, to our familial and ancestral patterns. And we see it happen over and over and over again. And so in the next episode, we're really going to look at the components that are required for big shifts in that area, aside from all the physical stuff that I had just mentioned. So I'm diving into the mental, the emotional, the spiritual bodies and aspects of my journey. Most of you who sent questions and completed my informal Instagram survey said that that's what you wanted to hear about, was the spiritual stuff. So I wanted to allow for more time on that by having a totally separate episode instead of squeezing it into this already really mega episode with this one. And I'm excited to share that piece of my journey with you, which again is going to look so different for everyone. Okay, so there was so much there. Remember that if there was a resource that you wanted to hear more about or get clarification on, we should have it listed up on my website, wildlyrooted.com/podcast. But if you use the specific link in the show notes, it'll take you to the full show notes for this particular episode show notes page, and you should find them there. And again, I'd love to hear your feedback, or if there's anything that you find has been really helpful for you, supportive for you, I would love to share that out. If you're on Instagram, maybe tagging me or commenting, DMing me, and I'd love to just share the resource for everyone, because again, like this is such a personal experience and journey, and there are so many beautiful resources out there that I am not familiar with. So if there are things that have worked for you and you want to share it out, please let me know. And I'll try to do my best to share that with anyone who's interested too. All right, my dears, with that, I am sending you so much love, and I can't wait to dive in with you next week when I go more into those subtle body realms, and have a beautiful full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus. It's going to be a deep one, and I'm sending you all the best. Until next time. Hey there, I made something for you. One of the biggest challenges that I hear from people is that they are feeling stuck when it comes to their health. You're a smart, capable, and creative change maker, right? And you know what you should be doing for your health. So what gives? Well, it's not about willpower. And I wanted to create something that would help you to unlearn the things that are keeping you stuck so that you can get out of your own way and master the mindset of health. That's why I created Wildly Unstuck, where you'll learn the top 5 things that I have found to sabotage your health goals and what to do about them. You'll learn what it really takes to become committed and unstoppable when it comes to your health goals and find the clarity you've been looking for so you know exactly what to do to get back into alignment. And I made it totally free. So if this is something that you want to dive into and create a vision and soul goals for your health and your life and bring your gifts to the world, because we know that we need it, then I invite you to join us in Wildly Unstuck. You can find that at wildlyrooted.com/unstuck. I'll see you on the other side.